So within transgender people, we call it passing. That's when you're transitioning to present as another gender, when you walk out into the world and people immediately assume you to be that gender, that's being referred to as you pass.
Okay.
And so that began for me when I was about 17.
Okay.
I had enough physical change that I would speak to people, I would go places, and they would just immediately recognize me as being female. And my mental health still wasn't better. The way I felt about myself didn't get better. I was still so desperate for something. And then that was when I became really desperate for surgical intervention.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So the Cass report was released recently and it basically confirms a lot of what we've been saying, that this is absolute insanity what they're doing to young people who have gender dysphoria or who believe for some reason that, they're going to identify as another gender and end up taking all these hormones, puberty blockers, even surgery. All of these procedures being pushed upon young people who have questions about their gender. The Cass report has recently revealed that the concerns that we had, we were right to have those concerns. All the gaslighting can stop, all the lies can stop, the misinformation, disinformation that's being put out there, all the accusations can stop. We have people who show genuine concern and they get accused of being transphobic, or they get accused of even genociding people. All of that nonsense can stop now because more research is coming out. Research that has been lacking for the longest time. Despite this lack of research, despite this lack of knowledge about the long-term consequences of these so-called medical procedures, they were still pushed on people, and especially on young people. They were still given promises that these procedures were, going to take away all their problems and they'll finally be comfortable in their bodies. Parents being told if they don't allow their children to permanently alter their bodies before they're old enough to even understand the full implications of doing that they could end up with a deceased child. A lot of the promises that were being made to young people and their parents, again, were lies. And no doctor should be making such bold claims without the research to back it up, without the evidence, without the proof, without the knowledge. And all these people who advocate for these procedures to be pushed on young people, TRAs, I question, do you know what you're advocating for? The answer is no, because they've admitted that there's a lack of research. They've admitted that there's a lack of knowledge. And we still need to make sure that we research this fully before we start pushing it on people, especially young people who are going to make changes to themselves that they cannot reverse, they cannot undo. And the real issue is regret. That is the biggest threat. But for the longest time, they've been telling us that that's not true, that it's bigoted even to suggest such a thing, to suggest that a young person might end up regretting believing they were in the wrong body all that time and making changes to their body that were unnecessary. For the longest time, we've been told that we're not even allowed to say that. We're not even allowed to think that. Well, what has been left is a trail of young people who do have regret. So many that it's even hard to keep track. How many young people have ended up regretting these procedures that have been done to them? The UK is finally waking up. My question is America going to do the same and follow suit? Or are you going to stay in your delusion and interfering in the lives of young people who are fine just the way they are? So over the years, even as early as 2015, as far back as I can remember, there were experts giving their professional opinions and talking about how this is a mental disorder. This is gender dysphoria. These are young people who have gone through trauma, and that has actually been revealed that a lot of it is linked to going through some sort of trauma, or it could be linked to other conditions such as autism, such as depression. But I found that that information was essentially wiped from the internet. The one or two studies that had been done, the one in Sweden, for example, the transsexual study, the only long-term study that's out there really, that found that unaliving rates is higher within this group due to regret, not due to being denied surgery, not due to being denied hormones, but due to regret, due to actually being given these procedures in abundance, and then them turning around realizing they've made a mistake that they cannot undo. People today, with micro penises, we're confining people to, where they haven't even developed fully.
So one of the biggest issues is that if you think about, we haven't probably heard lots about surgery, but if you think about vaginoplasty, the creation of a vagina in an assigned male, you need tissue, genital tissue, to create that vagina. And if we are taking a 11-year-old boy who does not have a lot of genital tissue and blocking puberty right there, we're preventing the growth of the vagina for down the road.
Can you undo that? No. Despite the lies that some doctors put out there saying that it can be, puberty blockers can be reversed. The effects of that can be reversed. No, it can't. Even hormones, there are detransitioners today still dealing with the effects of hormones, even though they haven't been on hormones for years. There are detransitioners today wondering about their fertility. There are detransitioners today who had their healthy breasts removed on the advice of doctors because they were told that transitioning was going to help them. Now they're wondering why they ended up doing something that is going to prevent them from breastfeeding their child, if they're even able to go on and have a child. We had psychiatrists, we had medical literature being changed to accommodate gender ideology, to accommodate these lies. What happened to do no harm? I don't know. Apparently, that's been replaced with experimenting on young people. That's been replaced with making sure that young people become lifelong patients. And of course, we're not even going to get into the money that's behind all of this, behind the so-called research, behind all of these hormones and various medications, groundbreaking medical procedures that are essentially cosmetic procedures, designed to make someone feel more masculine, designed to make someone feel more feminine. But all it does is cause harm to someone's body, long-term consequences. And we're only beginning to see a fraction of that manifest now with people who have gone through these procedures and are reporting on how their bodies have been damaged as a result.
Let's talk about Hilary Cass, who's the most important person here. Well, most important person who's actually trying to do something to look after children, in my view. She's a paediatrician. She's the former president of the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health. She's carried out a 4-year review into the services provided for children who believe they are trans in NHS England. It doesn't apply to NHS Scotland, sadly, but she's basically said that the evidence for the treatment of children is weak. It's based on shaky foundations. There is no good evidence for long-term outcomes for the puberty blockers and other treatments. She's called for an end to all puberty-blocking hormone drugs to be given to under 18s. She wants even a more therapeutic, holistic approach to those aged 17 to 25, which is when brain development is still happening. A full pause in any treatment for 16 and 17-year-old new patients. She says there's also no clear evidence that social transitioning, we know that's happening at schools a lot, where teachers are saying, yes, you can be referred to by your preferred pronouns, you can change your gender at school, and you can change your name, even without parents knowing about it. That's against government guidance, but they still allow it. She says there's no clear evidence that social transitioning has positive impact or negative impact on this.
So the report did recognise that there is an increase in the number of young people who are dealing with gender dysphoria, who are questioning their gender. And social factors was one of the reasons mentioned for this increase. And we know that it coincides with the increased use of certain apps such as TikTok, certain social media usage. Ben Affleck's daughter recently came out as trans at a funeral, at her grandfather's funeral, I believe. And apparently his wife, Jennifer Lopez, her daughter, is non-binary. Remember when Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt's daughter dressed up as a boy? There were people labelling this child trans when the family never came out and said anything of the sort. And now this young girl clearly is a very beautiful young lady. She went through a phase. That's it. Now young people aren't even allowed to go through phases of dressing a certain way. The very ideology that claims that there were no boundaries when it comes to gender certainly loves to push gender stereotypes. So the whole element of it being a social contagion. Some people say, oh, that's bigotry to say that, but it's a reality. While a considerable amount of research has been published in this field, systematic evidence reviews demonstrated the poor quality of the published studies, meaning there is not a reliable evidence base upon which to make clinical decisions, or for children and their families to make informed choices. That's it. There's a lack of informed consent when it comes to pushing these procedures on children and their families. There's a lack of knowledge, there's a lack of studies, there's a lack of proof, evidence that they all claim exists. The studies that are out there, who sponsors these studies? There's people saying that kids are born in the wrong body, they're born with a female brain, but in a male body. They're talking like that as if it's fact, as if there are definitive studies that prove this. But yet, when you talk to people who push this sort of ideology, they will mention these studies, or not even mention studies, they'll just mention their views and talk about them as if they're fact. And then look at you as if you're crazy or as if you're uneducated because you're not going along with it. They tell you to educate yourself and that sort of thing, as if what they're saying is so scientifically backed. And let's not even talk about the inconsistency of saying that a child is too young to drive, a child is too young to decide they're going to drink alcohol, too young to get a tattoo. But for some reason, they can decide to permanently alter their bodies. They can make a decision about something that can leave them infertile, something that can leave them with long-term health issues, low bone density.
The other biggest problem with the GnRH analogs is that normally puberty is a time of putting the calcium into your piggy bank. So this is how we explain it to families. You've got a piggy bank for your calcium. You better get it all in by 25 because at 25, you're going to live off that piggy bank. And particularly if you're trans feminine, you're going to come off your estrogen someday and you're going to be at higher risk for osteoporosis. So the puberty blockers slow that calcium accrual back into the bone quite a bit, back to the prepubertal level. And we do know that even if you look at people now at age 22, this is the Dutch folks and now other folks, even at age 22, if you've done all of this and you've gone off and then you go back on the hormones that you want to have, you have not caught up by age 22, which is about the time you need to fill up your piggy bank. So this is a concern that not everybody is getting their piggy bank completely filled up with calcium. And this is just a picture of how calcium works in assigned males.
They're supposed to understand all of that while they're still a child and know what they're getting themselves into. They're supposed to be able to consent to puberty blockers. Do they know all the implications of skipping puberty, do they?
There's lots of stuff that obviously teenagers, their brains are changing, they're unwiring, they're rewiring. And if we've started one kid unwiring and half rewiring, and then we change their puberty the other way and we're unwiring, so people have been trying to, the Dutch in particular, have been trying to figure out what this does for kids' brains. There's not been any really good evidence that we're doing anything terrible with their brain. But the things I think we kind of see how the kids are doing anyway. They're often super unhappy because they're in the wrong period, the puberty. Then they go out of puberty. Then they go back into puberty. And they seem to do reasonably the same as their friends, but we're not looking at their IQ and their learning ability and lots of other things.
This is the sort of thing that we've been told, that kids can consent to these things. And it's just not true. They can't consent to a tattoo. Why on earth can they consent to being chemically castrated? And the very act of questioning these things, you're accused of anything from bigotry to genocide. This is the sort of nonsense we've had to deal with just for speaking up and saying that I wouldn't do that to children if I was you. I would not engage in this sort of activity. It's unsafe. So the use of masculinizing, feminizing hormones in those under the age of 18 also presents many unknowns, despite their long-standing use in the adult transgender population. The lack of long-term follow-up data on those commencing treatment at an earlier age means we have inadequate information about the range of outcomes for this group. Absolutely. So no more, oh, it can be reversed. Oh, they're not really doing that to children. All lies. Jazz Jennings had full gender reassignment surgery and multiple follow-up surgeries to address complications at the age of 17, puberty blockers from the age of 11. Chloe Cole spoke about having a double mastectomy at the age of 15. Young girls who have stopped taking testosterone are still dealing with the consequences. And then, further on into adulthood, they start having issues with their bone mineral density, and they start dealing with the consequences of that, like fractures and injuries. And a child is supposed to understand all of this? Doctors don't even understand all of it. The Cass report says that there isn't enough information yet, that we don't know. Doctors don't know. Yet we expect children to know? That doesn't make any sense. If the doctors are still unaware of the long-term implications, the child certainly isn't going to know, and certainly isn't going to comprehend. Yet they were pushing this on young people. And of course, after the report came out, you've got people who are denying that they ever recommended these things to young people. You've got them gaslighting further and saying, well, we know, we didn't really say that. You've got them avoiding the question of follow-up. When it comes to following up on the young people who've been given these procedures and how they're doing now, what are the long-term consequences of them being put through these procedures? They've got no answer for you.
Let's get to the reaction of Lauren Stoner, Chief Executive of the charity Mermaids. Lauren Stoner, thank you very much for being with us. I want to get you just to respond, first of all, if you wouldn't mind, to what Sue Evans says about political ideology capturing some of these groups and forcing this kind of treatment onto children. How do you respond to that?
I think it's very difficult to suggest that that's the case. We have been supporting trans young people and their families for nearly 30 years. And over that time we have been focused on providing that support to young people and families who often struggle to find that support elsewhere. We were commissioned to provide some focus groups to the Cass review, but otherwise we're not clinical professionals. We don't get involved in the decisions that are made between a young person, their family and their clinicians.
And Lauren, let me get you then your response to the review, because I've seen the statement and sort of it's generally welcomed, but there are some concerns. I mean, what's your sense of it?
I think there are some real positives within the review. I think it's great to see that what we've been calling for years, which is timely, holistic, supportive care for trans young people and their families, is being called for, and there's a recognition that the NHS has been failing these young people and their families for many, many years. At the moment we're talking about waiting lists of over 5,000 young people and 5-year plus wait times, which is just unacceptable. You wouldn't expect it for any other form of healthcare, so why for this?
Yeah.
So that's really important. What we'd also say is that while there are some concerns, so we're concerned that there are some, there's some language in there around sort of social transition, which will obviously cause worry for families. And we also, but we do welcome the fact that there's a call for much greater, more supportive care closer to people's homes.
Yeah, and we'll come on to some of the concerns in a moment, Lauren, but in terms of the failing of the NHS for people going through this, do you accept that it's sort of failed all the way round, failed on both aspects, both in not providing services quickly enough to those that need it, but perhaps also providing services to people that didn't need it?
I think that would be, we're not medical experts, we don't advocate for any pathway, and we know that for many young people a medical pathway isn't the right one. They need, support and time to understand their options and to do that in a supportive space, but when you're talking about a waiting list of 5+ years, then it's absolutely unrealistic that, that support can be available in a timely manner.
Yeah, and of course that support should be available as quickly as possible. I think in your response you say that trans youth tell us they want services that are accepting and respectful and provide access to medical transition if and when they need it. I mean, that's sort of the crux of some of this, isn't it? If and when they need it. Do you have a sense, I mean, I know you're still going through the review, but do you have a sense when that should be brought in? At which point in a person's treatment should that become an option for them?
Fundamentally, that should be between a young person and the clinicians and other professionals involved in their care alongside their families.
Absolute load of nonsense. You see how they downplay the role that they had to play in all of this? Now they're downplaying it. Now they're saying that they're not medical experts. But these are the same people who make bold claims all the time. These are the same people who call this life-saving gender-affirming care. These are the same people who would say that you're causing young people to unalive themselves because you're denying these services. The quote he just read out there, she was saying that young people should just be given these procedures when they need it. Now she's downplaying that she said that. Now she's not a medical expert. That statement in itself is saying that young people decide, that young people should be given procedures that they ask for, regardless of whether they even understand what they're asking for, regardless of whether they even understand the long-term implications, whether they can actually truly consent. She was just saying, just give it to them, because this is what they need. The NHS is failing them by denying them these services. That's what they were saying before, shouting that from the rooftops. And now they're not medical experts. Now they can't comment on it. It's between the physician and the patient and their parents, apparently. These are the same people who made bold statements and would tell us that we don't know what we're talking about. You're not a medical professional. Because the medical professionals backed these people up. The medical professionals recommended this care for young people. So it emboldened these so-called activists, these trans right activists. It emboldened them when really they were pushing something on children that they knew nothing about. Because even the doctors don't know the full implications yet.
Okay. Dr. Cass also said that the use of puberty blockers in this type of for this type of use is novel because we don't know the long-term impact on brain development or psychosexual development. I mean, do you accept that they're not safe to use in some of these instances?
What we know is that there are a number of studies. Those studies are very varied, and it's difficult to grade some of those studies. I'm not an expert in clinical trials. What we would say is that there are, Dr. Cass herself does recognise that there are situations where these medications may be indicated, and that it's important that those young people are able to access that care at the right time. And that sometimes there's a very short window for that time. So, there is that period of, key period of pubertal development where, puberty blockers can and may be a really useful intervention. And it would be up for a young person and their family and their clinicians to discuss that.
Laura, may I just press you on that? Why would the window be such a short time in your experience that someone may well need that kind of medical intervention? If we're thinking about a holistic approach,
So when we're talking about a holistic approach, obviously we're talking about the range of options available to a young person. So we want holistic care. We want all of the options to be available, and we want all of those options to be discussed and shared with young people as that's the right time. What Dr. Cass has said somewhere in the report, it's a very large report, and as you can imagine, we're still analysing it in detail, is that there may be a narrow window during which puberty blockers are the most effective for some groups of young people.
Yeah,
Oh, please. Puberty blockers were initially to help young people who went through puberty at a very young age, the point where it was traumatic. That's my understanding of the purpose of puberty blockers, not to change your frigging gender. And I know at least here, there are some crazy doctors who shouldn't really call themselves doctors, who recommend that the transitioning happens at a young age, as young as possible, that they're given puberty blockers. Why? So that a young person can be passing.
It really began with the doctor I was seeing within the gender clinic. They basically, any procedure you want, they can kind of direct you in that path. They can get you into a consult for it. They can make it happen really quickly. And I remember my mom, stepfather, and I, a very common theme every time we were in the gender clinic was that these surgeries and doing all this young, you won't even really feel transgender. You'll look like a biological female. You'll be one. And that came up a lot once I got to the bottom surgery. But that was a common thing that was present within the clinic. And that was something that I picked up on really fast. And then adding in social media and the older trans people I was seeing jazz, it gave me the idea that I almost wouldn't have to be transgender, because if I do this all really young and fast, then I feel like I can skip that.
Mm-hmm.
And they made it feel real. They made it feel like that was a real thing.
That's the real reason why they put kids on puberty blockers and all of that. All for cosmetic reasons. And all of these procedures are cosmetic. They're not life-saving. They're not dealing with an injury or an illness. It's all cosmetic. And we're doing this to young people just so they can look a certain way. Oh, they won't get misgendered if they look like, a girl. They won't get misgendered. They won't be told to leave the bathroom because no one will know. All of this is barbaric. So no, you don't get to downplay the part you had to play. You so-called activists. You don't get to downplay the lies, the bold-faced lies that you told, your position of authority in whatever capacity that you abused to push gender ideology. You don't get to downplay that or deny it. We will never forget. The J.K. Rowling responded to this saying, absolute, total, shameless lies. Your ex-CEO referred children to the Tavistock Gender Clinic. Mermaids has repeatedly claimed puberty blockers are reversible. Sent out breast binders to girls as young as 13 and insisted publicly that unless children are affirmed in their trans identities, they'll kill themselves. Your fingerprints are all over the catastrophe of child transition, and those who funded you, campaigned for you, and allowed you to embed yourselves in healthcare systems need to be held to account. Absolutely. That's why I say to the TRAs, know what you're advocating for. Know what you're advocating for young people to be exposed to. Before you start putting your name on it and your reputation on it, know exactly what you're advocating for. And the fact is, you don't know, but yet you're still pushing for this to be given to young people, these procedures to be given to young people. And when lawmakers say, no, that's not right, you accuse them of killing young people. These are the same people who accused people like Libs of TikTok being responsible for the tragic death of Next Benedict. These are the same people, including the President of the United States, saying that it was discrimination, being denied healthcare. Then it turns out that this young person was subject to the most horrific abuse at the hands of her own father. But there's so much focus on cosmetic procedures, as if these cosmetic procedures are going to take away the young person's problems. So much focus on that, and not enough focus on them dealing with their trauma, on them dealing with what led to them questioning who they are. If we can get back to telling young people that they're fine just the way they are, that they're not in the wrong body, if we can get back to that, then perhaps we could be a lot more effective. A study in the Netherlands found the majority of gender-confused children grow out of that feeling by the time they are fully grown adults, according to a long-term study. Researchers in the Netherlands tracked more than 2,700 children from age 11 to their mid-20s, asking them every 3 years of feelings about their gender. Results showed, at the start of the research, around 1 in 10 children, 11%, expressed gender non-contentedness to varying degrees. But by 25, just 1 in 25, 4%, that they often or sometimes were discontent with their gender. Chloe Cole, who has given testimonies about her experience said she simply grew out of it, and her parents were never given the option of it simply being a phase. And all she needed was some support. I really hope the US begins to wake up like the UK has. Hope they take note and new recommendations are made within the medical profession. But unfortunately, there's a lot of money riding on having these lifelong patients. And let's not pretend that that's not a factor. So thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.